So it's been a while since I made one of these top 10 or top 5 type of videos, just because I thought it'd be more convenient to do them more so on milestones rather than just whenever. But the other day when talking to a few friends for a video idea, we came across the topic of the best manga arcs. And so that's kind of how I ended up here, because I wanted to talk about a few of my favorite manga arcs. And not really the arcs I think are the best in all of manga, but just my specific top 5 favorite arcs. And I think this would be a great time to engage in conversation in the comment section below. So during or after the video, let me know your top 5 favorite manga arcs so we can compare and discuss each other's list. Also, just to make this clear, this isn't an objective list. I genuinely think my opinion might be different from quite a lot of people, at least when it comes to what I think is the best arc in a specific series. It just usually depends on how much I get emotionally invested or hooked onto a certain part of a story. So that's why you might see a certain series on this list that you probably have a rough understanding of what the community's favorite arc is, but it's probably not on my list. And this was a hard decision for most of these, but when I look back and view my experience while I'm reading, I get this feeling that is honestly just indescribable. And I could sit here all day and talk about my experiences from reading manga, but that just isn't the point of this video. So without any further delay, these are currently my top 5 manga arcs. Now, to start off the list, we have the second arc from the Promised Neverland, Jailbreak. It's technically the first arc, but it's weird. So for example, if you've seen the first season of the anime, then I'm talking about those first 12 episodes, but in the form of the manga. It's hard to explain, just know I'm talking about the part in the series before they all escape from the Gracefield house. Now, the reason why I picked the very first arc in the series are for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is because this series instantly gave me a reminiscent feeling of when I first watched Attack on Titan. The feeling of just complete mystery of not knowing what's beyond where they stay. And reason number two is interesting if you know me. I love to exploit things and I love to think for days on end about a series if it can get me to that point. Just the thought of endless theories about a series you know only very little about just gets me so excited for the future of that particular series. And with The Promised Neverland, it did just that. Within just the first few chapters alone, it's a complete script flip. You have no idea what's going on within the start of the series, and once you finally start to get a feeling of what's going on, it's shattered and completely rewritten while you continuously keep reading. And it's difficult to really grasp onto a story like this because you just don't know what's next. After each and every chapter, just within this arc alone, it's an endless amount of twists and turns, and that's personally why an arc like this is simply deserving of being on my number 5 spot. But coming in at number 4 is a pick that is completely recency biased, but I just can't get over what an amazing arc this was and just story in general. The Tenjiku arc in Tokyo Revengers was an arc to remember, and with a longitude of great build up, the peak moments it had in this arc was absolutely insane. It's as if everything you ever wanted in this series was accomplished and done flawlessly for the most part. Of course, if you read the manga, you would know that this isn't the last arc in the series, so obviously there were some hiccups in the story to continue on the plot, but for myself, I felt that a lot of my self goals for this series was accomplished during this arc. And I never usually do that within a series, it just so happened to fall that way with Tokyo Revengers. And I never thought I could see so many characters I thought I would never tend to enjoy, grow and persevere through many problems and barriers throughout this arc alone. And from our main character, Takemichi Hanagaki, a lot of his main problems are put to rest and ease, as he, along with the people of the gang of Tomen, make sure that even with the odds are against them, they make sure to carry on what is right for the future of themselves. Another thing I tended to find enjoyment from this arc was the thought of mystery. Like most series, I love to think, and when it comes to the thought of what's next, even after our main cast goals have been accomplished, it drives me to find more within the series, and since it ended up being that way, with the end of the arc started a whole new beginning, and that's just why I had to put the Tenjiku arc at my number 4 spot. Moving on to the number 3 spot, we have Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc from Berserk. Once again, my condolences to Kentaro Miura's friends and family, and rest in peace Kentaro Miura. Because look man, I've been with this series for not nearly as long as the majority of Berserk readers. It was a series that was recommended to me for so very long, and I just chose to put it off, but I knew it was going to be a series that I would genuinely enjoy, and it really was. What Berserk was for me initially before even reading it was a fantasy-esque type of series, and of course it was, but it's what pushed me to get into the series in the first place. And for me, that's why this arc specifically is why I have it so high on my list. I've always been a fan of like Lord of the Rings and just fantasy type of settings, so when reading and experiencing that from a series like Berserk is when I think I truly fell in love with this series. And I think it's obviously just the beginning of that type of feel with the start of Fantasia, but Falcon of the Millennium Empire is just an all-out amazing arc with pretty much all you can ask for when it comes to a dark fantasy. It's where I think it starts to expand more on its world and the extensive amount of travel and politics. They were introduced a lot more characters characters and more of a magic setting in between, and it just feels like everything is more of that fantasy type of feel. So when you combine that with Kentaro Miura's amazing writing and top tier artwork, it really all just falls down into being, at least in my opinion, the best arc in Berserk, right there with the Golden Age arc. And now I think with these next two arcs, it might be obvious, but it's just something I thought was right, but it was also changed along the way. By that I mean the number 2 spot originally, I was going to generally put down the 57th exterior scouting mission from Attack on Titan, which if you didn't know was also known as the female Titan arc towards the start of the first half of the series, but that ended up not being the case, and the arc I chose was the Return to Shiganshina arc, also from Attack on Titan. This one was genuinely a hard one because the only reason why I was considering that other arc was because I felt like it was the peak in terms of my curiosity for the series. But obviously I've always been curious and have been wondering, but when I look back in time, I feel like that arc to me just had more of that connection even after I think about the arc I chose over it. However, the Return to Shiganshina arc just had everything I ever wanted and more. When I look back at myself watching and reading the series for the first time, I feel empty to a certain extent, but still have that drive to carry out what needs to be done. And even from both sides, we get a perspective from the other side of the wall. Something if you ask myself way back when, I wouldn't even believe it. Most of the mysteries and encounterments were answered, and it just felt like it was a sense of fulfillment from this arc. All in all, this arc was just jam-packed with answers, thrills, and just all-out fights that I wouldn't even ever have believed if you told me back during my time with theorizing, back when I first read and watched the 57th exterior scouting mission. So of course, that's why the Return of Shiganshina was an arc to remember at the number 2 spot on my list. So now before we move on to the number 1 spot, I do want to speak about some honorable mentions that honestly are subject to change some of my list within the near future. I just think that while I read and explore so many different anime and manga, it has made me think about the future in which I think I would view things from a perspective of build-up and just outstanding writing. A lot more than just personal feelings, but I don't know, it's really a tough question when being asked, but I generally tried my best on my own list. But a couple of these are what I think might impact myself in the future once I read them for myself. So before I lose track, the first honorable mention is from a series I'm already familiar with, and that's Hunter x Hunter. As much as people call me a Hunter x Hunter hater, I did enjoy the series, and I do think both York New City and the Chimera Ant arc are some of the best pieces from Shonen Jump. And hell, I even think they're better than some of the choices I have on my own list in terms of writing. But I just wasn't as emotionally invested in them as I was for these other arcs. And these next two are from series that I both started, just haven't got to that specific arc just yet. First is the Shogun assassination arc from Gintama. I heard great things, but just haven't pushed myself to that point yet in the series. And finally, the one I think is probably going to change something in my top 5 once I reach it is the Coalition Invasion arc in Kingdom. This arc has been hyped up for me so much, and it's actually the reason why I started reading Kingdom. I'm about 150 chapters deep, and I'm absolutely loving this series. From what I've heard, this arc tops all war arcs in anime and manga, so I know if what people are telling me is true, then it might just be subject to change, the number 1 on my list being Marineford from One Piece. I'm sure most of you all saw this one coming, especially from me, someone who has been a fan of One Piece for quite a while now. I just think that Marineford to me was an arc like no other. Regardless of the fact where I might be questioning things for hours on end, Marineford from One Piece did the exact opposite. I was stunned with the fact that literally everything I had ever known from the series was gathered in one place. And literally mostly every powerhouse that was hyped up in the series so far was there, and everything was on the line. I wouldn't be able to tell you how much time went into the thoughts afterwards. It wasn't even about thinking farther in the future, but more on a reflection on everything that just happened. It was back to back to back to back panels of endless amount of iconic phrases and scenes that would shake the entire world in and out of the story of One Piece. Even till this day, I go back to either read and or watch it, and it still just gives me chills thinking about the characters like Whitebeard, Ace, Luffy, Shanks, Kobe, Blackbeard, literally everyone, like Akainu, literally any character during that war meant something and was important to the conflict of the story. From start to finish, the arc was nothing but a masterpiece, and I do think Oda is capable of doing something even better once the story meets its end, and honestly, I don't think One Piece would be the same without it because it was something that was constantly set up since Alabasta, so it just makes me wonder where One Piece would be without it. This arc alone changed the future and entirety of the story for the better, and to me, that's why Marineford or the Summit War from One Piece is my absolute favorite arc in all of manga. But as always, everyone, to those of you who made it to the end of the video, I hope you all did enjoy the video. This video wouldn't have been possible without the help and support from you guys, so once again, I truly do appreciate all the love and support throughout the YouTube journey so far. But before you head on out, make sure before you click out the video to not forget to subscribe to the channel and join the Discord if you have not already. Link in the description box down below. And with that, everyone, my Twitter's at AnimeAlki, and I'll make sure to catch each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Peace.